So while the Rokakaka is not quite ripe for harvest just yet, I can assure you that my subscribe button certainly is, which you should immediately take advantage of, resulting in regular JoJo content being uploaded straight into your YouTube feed. I mean, yeah, it's unlikely to cure your rock disease, but it will cure a tiny bit of your boredom. Maybe. Do it anyway. It couldn't hurt much. Hello and welcome to the New World Review, your source for everything anime and manga. And today I present to you what I would call some very risky content with a review of chapter 95 of JoJo Leon. Risky because JoJo Leon is an already fairly niche sector of a niche series, and reviews typically do not do very well on this channel at the best of times, but we're going to give this a go regardless. And to begin, I really do have to say that I am very unsteady on the subject of reading monthly manga in general. A month to me feels like just enough time to have forgotten about the intricacies of anything going on in the series, but with that in mind, chapter 95 was a pretty solid experience. Quite probably due to the fact that we are rapidly reaching the height of drama in part 8, and there's quite a bit to digest in this chapter, much more so than your average one. And first and foremost, rest in peace, Fruit Dad. So given how recently I got into part 8, I'm still not sure how I feel about Norisuke in general, but that goes for most of the cast of JoJo Leon because they are all such morally ambiguous figures. I will say that it was still pretty heartbreaking to watch Norisuke's demise though. However, it may have been potentially slightly undercut by the fact that we all knew it was coming thanks to the flash forward all those chapters ago. Still, this was a pretty brutal way to go out with Jobin activating Speed King to do the deed. I mean, death by heat stroke is just not enviable in any way. Definitely not my choice to leave this world. Although at least it was fairly quick, so there is that. But it certainly is a shame because Norisuke was quite the character. Someone who I said I was never quite sure if I was on board with or not, and that feeling remains right up until the end here, because even in his final moments, he seemed like he was at the very least prepared to let Yasuho die, if that was indeed the best course of action for the family. Which, you know, pretty damn cold, but completely within the bounds of the character that we've been presented with thus far in JoJo Leon. In the end though, Norisuke's moral compass is tuned for us, with him admitting that yeah, perhaps he was a bit old-fashioned, and maybe he could have come to a more modern way of thinking in regards to fruit vending management, which is a sentence I never thought I'd say in my life. However, when it comes to his family, Norisuke would not veer away from the path that he believed to be correct, which is a nice show of semi-nobility here. But of course, Jobin is being just as stubborn as his father, believing that his way forward is the only option, even if it means killing said father. And you know what? It's starting to feel an awful lot like Jobin is going to be the big bad of part 8. I mean, yes, there are still other candidates, one of which I'll be discussing later in this review, but Jobin has very much crossed a line at this stage that he can't really return from. Murdering your father for the sake of your beliefs is a pretty big villainous maneuver, but I do appreciate how it was conducted, because just as I wasn't sure how to feel about Norisuke, I'm still also quite conflicted about Jobin, because he is a man who truly believes that his actions are all in the service of the betterment of the world. Or well, not the world, but for the good of his family. And not just his son either, because if this was all about Tsurugi, then there's always the option to have had Norisuke sacrifice himself for Tsurugi's sake, which, you know, if you're gonna kill your father anyway, at least save your son in the process. So this is clearly bigger than that. Or perhaps it's smaller and much more petty, with Jobin wanting to be the person to save his son rather than having his father do it. Either way, that right there is a super strong and compelling characterization of a villain, and it probably works particularly well with the scale of the story that has been set up in JoJo Leon. It's another part 4 style affair where we've narrowed down our focus, and thus the final antagonist doesn't have to be some sort of big world-ending or world-reshaping threat like a Bucci or a Valentine or a Dio. And furthermore, at this point, I feel like Jobin is probably the only character who can helm this series and provide any sense of emotional resonance from a climactic conflict. The only exception to this that I could see is if it turned out that alternate universe Kira had been the true villain all along, because, you know, he's a doctor, and these days we are extraordinarily wary of doctors, in JoJo Leon anyway, but thus in a weird way it would make our JoJo both the protagonist and antagonist of the series, which would be an interesting turn. But at the moment I'm still looking pretty hard at Jobin, although as of yet his stand doesn't have the trademark overpowered angle that is present in every primary antagonist since stands were introduced. Still, there's certainly time to evolve Speed King into some sort of fitting beastly existence. Of course, at the moment that kind of power is very present in our head doctor, Satoru Akefu, who honestly remains one of the most intriguing figures that I think I've ever encountered in a JoJo series. There's just something so profoundly sinister about a being who brings misfortune and calamity to you simply by doing absolutely nothing except being present. His stand ability really does sound like some sort of creepypasta. You know, a legend about a shady man in black, and if you so much as see him, then it is more than likely going to be an indicator of your imminent death via some sort of bizarre natural force. And then people point out, well, if everyone who sees him dies, then how do we know the legend? And thus the cycle of weirdness perpetuates. But I'm really looking forward to discovering how we're going to deal with him though, because he gives me the same sort of vibes that I recall having during the Bohemian Rhapsody arc of part 6. That sort of, okay, Araki has done it. This stand is just far, far too powerful to ever be defeated. And then the solution ends up being something so simple that it's just kind of hilarious. But we also have the title of a new arc with this chapter, which is Endless Calamity Part 1, which I imagine is referring to us placing a renewed focus on Satoru, which is the full stop in regards to the chapter as well. It ends with Mitsuba drawing attention to the fact that all of this misfortune being heaped onto the family is likely a result of Satoru's attack. So that's one reason I would say that he isn't going to be our final enemy, because we appear to have entered an arc strictly geared towards defeating him, which would still leave Jobin's conclusion to come afterwards, unless their threads are somehow cleverly tied together, which, it's always a possibility. But to me, it feels like Jobin and Satoru need their own separate arcs to explore and resolve those characters. While I'm still semi-focused on stands though, I did want to mention that it was really nice to see King Nothing again. It didn't get a mention in my JoJolion review, but this stand has to be one of my favorite designs, and it's so fascinating to view in action with all the puzzle pieces and everything. But to me though, King Nothing felt like quite an underused stand in part 8, but that's probably purely because I wanted to see more of it. And again, come to think of it, we really have not seen this stand in an awfully long time, have we? I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday, but King Nothing was one of those very early game existences in JoJolion, and I can't actually remember if it was used in the middling chapters, and it certainly has not been invoked before now in the end times. So with that in mind, this chapter I guess provided King Nothing with a nice little send-off after promptly ignoring it for the majority of the series. So King Nothing, I salute you and your brilliant design. But part 8 really does have a lot of really unique cool stands, because I also quite like Paisley Park with its app map texture finish and such, and kind of like King Nothing, I just appreciate its presence artistically in whatever panel it appears in, because it would take some real effort to put to page, and there are some great moments in this chapter where Paisley Park appears with Yasuho, and the stand is beautifully reflecting the anguish of its user, or at the very least as best as an artificial humanoid map thing can do. So it was nice to know that both it and Yasuho live to fight another day or another hour, maybe another minute, really? I mean, she's still in grand danger. But still, it's a sigh of relief, because there was a genuine sense of dread I had after chapter 94 that the entire family would just let her drown in a toilet. Perhaps even Joshu. Although speaking of Joshu, he would appear to have committed an action in this chapter that, dare I say, I appreciated. That was very difficult to say. And it's not explicitly stated, but the way the visuals play out clearly imply that Joshu is the one who kicked the phone over to the PowerPoint and allowed Paisley Park to escape. And it makes sense because he's pretty wildly whipped for Yasuho, but as a result, this is probably the first time that I've experienced Joshu on a page and not hated every second I saw of him. And to be clear, I still thoroughly dislike him. I think his design is awful. His comedy is a bit off for me anyway, and there is just so little that is redeeming about him in any way, shape or form. And even in his focus story, which was theoretically supposed to get me on board with him as a character, even that, by the end, he still turned out to be a dick. And really, the entire situation could have been resolved by simply not being a dick and not stealing the dude's wallet in the first place. But I'm going on a bit of a Joshu rant now, so I should probably stop before I mention him wanting to suck on his mother's breasts. But oh well, I guess I've mentioned it now. However, I will admit that was pretty shockingly funny. In any case, in the end here, we've taken some pretty big steps towards our teaser flash forward in which we saw Tsurugi with Norisuke's body. And after mentioning that part in the JoJolion review, I was given some theory speculating that no, that wasn't Norisuke, and it was actually part of Tsurugi's Paper Moon King stand somehow, but that very much looks to not be the case after this chapter. The question does become though, how is Tsurugi going to reach that point given that his body seems to have been taken over by the rock disease? And also the fact that in the flash forward, we saw the whole family acting fairly normal, and the best explanation I've seen in regards to that is that their memories will likely be removed by Daya and California Kingbed. But even then, I'm still not quite sure how that results in Tsurugi being saved, or at least temporarily saved from the raging rock disease. Unless maybe someone else makes a sacrifice for him before the harvest for some sort of reason. Like Kato maybe. Remember Kato? I sure didn't until I checked the JoJolion page of the JoJo wiki for this video. But she was another one of those candidates for primary antagonist, and I imagine that she was brought into this story for a reason. So if Tsurugi's condition simply can't wait for the harvest to be completed, then someone is going to need to act, and Kato is a pretty prime candidate for that. Although there really could be any number of other explanations, because one thing I've learned in this whole JoJo business is that I can never really predict the kind of craziness that Araki is capable of generating. I guess all I can say is that I am anxiously awaiting awaiting our ever-nearing conclusion. But yeah, all in all, JoJo Leon Chapter 95 was, honestly, a much better experience than I was expecting it to be. While I was reading Part 7 and Part 8, I'd often have the sort of, wow, I don't know if I'd be able to handle this being able to spread out over the course of, close to a decade. But I never should have doubted that because I read manga weekly, and most of it is a satisfying spread out experience. But mostly I'm just an impatient prick, and a month is an awfully long time, especially when you need to hop right back into the complexities of Endgame JoJo Leon. Because by then I'll have shifted focus to another series, but I will say that this little injection of JoJo very much hit the spot and reminded me of just how much I enjoyed reading what there was of Part 8 in bulk, as well as setting me up for a promising future experience over the next year, maybe 2? Because Part 8 surely cannot last too much longer than that. But what do you guys think? Please do let me know in the comments below, or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more JoJo content, then please do check out some of my other videos, or even subscribe to the channel for regular JoJo wonder delivered straight to your YouTube feed. But for now, this has been the New World Review, and I'll see you next time.